Hi, I'm Ariadne. This is the story of the night my parents kicked me out with nothing but a suitcase. I didn't beg. I didn't cry. I walked out, and the next morning, I woke up a millionaire. But if you think that changed everything, you're wrong. It was just past 10 p.m. The kitchen smelled like something burning, but no one moved to check the oven. My mother was on her third glass of red wine. Not the good kind, but the boxy kind she hid behind the rice cooker. And my father was slouched in his usual chair, half watching an old Western rerun. I stood in the hallway, suitcase in one hand, my duffel bag hanging off one shoulder, the strap cutting into my skin. My chest was tight, but my expression stayed blank. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. "You packed?" my mom asked, finally glancing over her wine glass. I nodded. She didn't blink. "Leave the house key." There was no goodbye, no hug, no last-minute change of heart. No one asked where I'd sleep, or if I had money, or if I'd be safe. It was as routine as tossing out the trash. "I paid rent with chores," I said, voice steady. "I cleaned, I cooked, You existed," she cut in, cold and final. "We didn't ask for that." Behind her, Mason barely looked up from his game console. His headphones were lit like a halo. My little brother, the golden child. The miracle baby that Mom had in her 40s after supposedly being told she couldn't conceive again. They'd built an entire narrative around him. I was just the practice child. My dad grunted. "We didn't raise you to be entitled." "You didn't raise me at all," I said before I could stop myself. Silence. Then a sharp laugh from Mom. "And that attitude? That's exactly why you're leaving." She took another sip, eyes locked on mine like she was daring me to speak again. I didn't. Instead, I dropped the key on the counter. It landed with a soft clink. No one moved. As I turned to leave, Mason finally spoke. "Don't forget your charger," he muttered, not looking up. My mom smirked. I stepped outside. The door clicked shut behind me. They didn't bother locking it. I sat on the curb, the cold from the pavement creeping into my bones. There was no plan, no friends to call. I hadn't been allowed to go to birthday parties, to sleepovers. My world had been school, work, and tiptoeing around my parents' moods. I stared at the sky. No stars tonight, just that heavy, humid Texas dark. I dug into my coat pocket and pulled out the scratch-off ticket I'd found earlier that week in the junk drawer. It was probably expired, probably worthless. But right then, it was the only thing that didn't hate me. I scratched. 3 matching numbers. Then I blinked. Again. Again. Then I checked the back of the card, and for the first time in my life, the air felt different, like the world had been holding its breath with me. I didn't scream, didn't laugh, just felt still. Completely still. I took that ticket and tucked it inside my duffel bag, in the zipped lining I'd never used. Then I stood up, glanced one last time at the porch light, still off, and walked. The bus stop was 2 miles away. I walked past houses with warm windows and laughter inside. Mothers kissing sons goodnight. Dogs barking at shadows. The world continued, utterly unaware that something in me had just cracked and reassembled. I stayed that night in a cheap motel where the man at the front desk didn't ask questions. $41 and change. The room smelled like mildew and old socks. But it had a lock, and that was more than I'd had a few hours ago. I laid on the bed, still in my coat, holding my bag like it was the only person left who knew me. I replayed everything. The time Mom forgot to pick me up from school in 3rd grade because Mason had soccer practice. The night Dad said, "You better pray you find a husband, because you sure as hell aren't gonna make it on brains." The way they called me a mistake, not behind closed doors, but openly, like it was just a family joke. I didn't cry, but I didn't sleep either. At 7:02 a.m. the next morning, I stood outside the lottery claims office in a town 2 hours away. The line was short. Most people were still waking up to regular lives. Bills, bosses, burnt toast. I was about to stop living mine. Inside, a woman scanned the ticket. Her eyebrows shot up. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice low, "you might want to sit down." She double-checked, triple-checked. "You just won $50 million." I said nothing. Not because I didn't believe her, but because I had always known something was coming. Something big. My mother used to call it my delusions of grandeur. She said I had main character syndrome. Maybe she was right. Maybe this was my plot twist. The woman looked nervous now, as if I might faint or scream. I didn't. I smiled. A small, slow smile. And then, I said, "Can you help me find a good lawyer?" The first thing I did with the money was nothing. No big celebration. No champagne on a rooftop or shopping spree through some glossy mall. Just a room, clean, quiet, and far enough from anyone who knew my name. I checked into a boutique hotel under an alias. No ID, just the new passport my lawyer rushed for me. I used the name Eva Linwood. It felt sharp. It felt like armor. The woman at the front desk smiled like she thought I was someone famous. I smiled back because for the first time, I was becoming someone. My lawyer, Julian Marks, had kind eyes and no interest in my story beyond what was legally required. That made me trust him. I told him only what he needed to know. I was estranged from my family. I wanted full privacy. I needed airtight security, a financial advisor, and a plan to disappear. Quietly. He nodded. "You'll want to form an LLC. Lottery trusts are easy to trace." "Can you build a life for someone who never had one?" Julian paused, then gave a small smile. "That's easier than fixing someone who thinks they don't deserve one." I didn't respond. I left with 4 burner phones, 2 sets of keys to 2 different condos in different states, and a sense of being freshly carved out of marble. It didn't take long for the news to break. The local paper published a story. Mystery woman claims $50 million jackpot, declines interview. No name, no photo. No one in my old town made the connection. I wasn't even mentioned in the graduation program. I was a ghost. My mother had deleted every photo of me from the family album months before I left, said it was to declutter. That was the first layer of the twist. They'd erased me before I vanished. I moved into a minimalist penthouse in Austin. White walls, floor-to-ceiling windows. A place built for someone who didn't want to remember where they came from. But memory has a cruel way of lingering. The second night there, I woke up at 2:17 a.m. in a cold sweat. I'd dreamed I was back home, standing in the kitchen, holding a plate of food I'd made, only for Mom to swat it from my hands and say, "What made you think we wanted anything from you?" I stayed up watching the sunrise, clutching a throw pillow like it might anchor me. The money sat untouched for days, except for the legal and relocation costs. I stared at it in the account Julian set up. Every day. Like it was a snake I had to train before it bit me. Until I remembered the notebook. A black and white marbled journal. I'd kept it since middle school. Every page was a record. Of slights, of wounds, of things I wasn't supposed to say out loud. Not rage, not revenge, just data. I opened to a page labeled, "If I Ever Leave." Get Nana's music box from attic. Find out why Mom hates mirrors. Write a college application with my name on it, just to see send anonymous flowers to Mrs. Perkins. High school counselor. Learn to drive better than Dad. Build something that makes them say, "That couldn't have been her." I read that list like scripture. Then I got to work. The first thing I did was buy back time. Not literally, but symbolically. I enrolled in online classes under a fake name. Psychology, business ethics, architectural drafting. Anything that felt like I was rewiring my brain. I studied quietly, obsessively. Not to prove anything. Not even to them. To myself. You weren't stupid. You were starved. A few weeks later, I reached out to Mrs. Perkins, my old school counselor. I used a private courier to deliver a gift box. Fresh flowers, a handwritten note, and an envelope with a check. To the only adult who looked me in the eye without judgment. I didn't sign it, but I hoped she knew. In return, I received a short typed note through the school office, delivered anonymously. I never stopped believing in you. Thank you for reminding me that sometimes we just need to keep showing up, even if no one claps. But not everything was poetic. One morning, I saw a viral video. Mason, my brother. He'd posted a TikTok of himself trash-talking a stupid sister who ran away while showing off a new gaming rig. I paused the video, rewatched, froze on the part where he laughed and said, "She was always jealous. That's why she never made it." The desk behind him, polished cherry wood, my mother's, which meant the office was now his room, which meant Nana's room had been gutted, which meant something inside me cracked open like a fault line. I closed my laptop, ordered coffee, and sat in silence. Then I made a call. "Julian, can you do a quiet property purchase?" "Of course. Residential?" "Sentimental." I bought the house next door to my childhood home. I didn't move in. I didn't even visit it, but I owned it. And I had cameras installed, facing my old home, just in case I ever forgot why I left. By the end of month 2, I had a plan. Restructure under a new identity, fund 3 scholarship programs in Nana's name. Under pseudonyms, watch, silently, as the world my parents built around lies begins to show its cracks. Because here's the thing no one tells you. Revenge doesn't always wear a sword. Sometimes it whispers. The thing about silence is that it echoes. I didn't hear my parents yelling anymore. Didn't see Mason's face pop up on my feeds. I had muted everything that tethered me to the place I used to call home. But even silence carries weight when it's built on things left unsaid. And the deeper I went into my new life, the more I felt that weight pressing in. I thought leaving would be enough, that having money, space, peace would make everything fade. But trauma isn't a fire you outrun. It's smoke in your lungs. I spent that week buried in files, not legal ones, not investments, but something more personal. I'd hired a private investigator, not for revenge, not yet. For truth. Because something still didn't sit right. The way my mother flinched when someone said Nana's name. The way my father always avoided eye contact during arguments. The way I didn't quite look like either of them. I didn't need drama. I needed answers. The report came on a Tuesday morning, slipped under the door of my temporary residence in Seattle. A high-rise apartment with furniture so minimal it felt like a showroom. Cold, sleek, intentional. Just like me. I opened the envelope slowly, read each page twice, and when I was done, I sat very still for a long time. Then I whispered, I knew it. There it was, in black and white. My mother had been engaged once before, at 19, to a man who died in a car crash weeks before their wedding. I wasn't my father's daughter, not biologically. He met my mother after she was already pregnant. They married when I was 2. I had no idea. Worse? She never told him the truth. He raised me thinking I was his. And maybe that was part of the reason he hated me so much. He'd been living a lie. But it wasn't the whole story. Because tucked behind that revelation was a second report. About Nana. About a trust fund. About money. Apparently, Nana had left a 5-figure education fund in my name. It was meant to mature on my high school graduation. She set it up years ago in a separate account, handled by a local credit union. She didn't trust my parents to do the right thing. Turns out she was right. 3 weeks after she died, my parents forged a set of documents to move the money into a joint account under Mason's name. They stole it and used it to send Mason to private tutoring, gaming tournaments, and gear. All while telling me college was out of the question. I called Julian. I want to confirm something, I said. Can you pull the documents Nana signed when she set up a trust in my name? He got quiet. Why? Because I think I'm ready to let some ghosts talk. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the balcony, watching the Seattle skyline pulse with life below me, and felt something inside shift. Not anger, not vengeance, clarity. They hadn't just stolen my money, they'd stolen my narrative. They raised me like I was unwanted, inconvenient, disposable. Not because I was, but because I wasn't theirs, not fully. I was a living mistake that exposed their secrets every time I walked into a room. I existed as proof of a lie they could never unlive. And now I understood. The next morning, I wrote a letter. Not to them, but to myself. Ariadne, you are not a placeholder. You are the whole damn book. Then I made my first real move. I returned to my hometown. Not publicly, not boldly. I rented an Airbnb 3 blocks from my old street. Unassuming. Lived in. I used a different name. Wore sunglasses everywhere. Didn't talk to anyone. But I walked. Past my old school. Past the park where I used to sit on the swings just to avoid going home. And finally, past my house. It was painted a dull beige now. The porch light flickered. Weeds crept up the driveway. My mother had always said front yards were a family's first impression. Apparently, they'd stopped caring. I stood across the street, heart pounding, watching as Mason pulled into the driveway, blasting music in his new car, probably funded by my college money. He got out, slammed the door, and yelled something toward the front window. Mom's voice yelled back. Business as usual. Only now, I wasn't on the inside of that chaos. I was observing it, like a scientist. And that was when the plan clicked into place. Not petty revenge, not public humiliation, just truth. Revealed with precision, with receipts. I flew back to Seattle the next day and met Julian. He looked at the papers I'd collected. This is damning, he said carefully. You could press charges, embezzlement, fraud, misuse of trust. I know, he studied me. Do you want justice or impact? I thought about it. Thought about Nana. About the years I cried into a pillow, asking what was so wrong with me that even my own parents couldn't love me. Both, I said. We started building a case, not for court, for power. I had no intention of dragging my family through legal hell, not because they didn't deserve it, but because lawsuits are loud. I needed quiet, strategic, surgical strikes. We began documenting everything: the stolen fund, the forged documents, the mishandling of school grants, the misreported income that denied me access to need-based scholarships. But the final twist came from a name I didn't recognize. Denise Carter, the woman who notarized the false transfer of Nana's trust. Julian tracked her down. She no longer worked in finance. She ran a bakery. I visited in person. It smelled like cinnamon and yeast inside. Warm, soft jazz playing in the background. Hi, she said cheerfully. What can I get you? I'm looking for someone, I said. Denise Carter? That's me, she replied, brushing flour from her apron. I showed her the paper. Her face went pale. I didn't think, God, this was years ago, she whispered. Your mom said it was an internal family matter. She said her daughter was on drugs and couldn't be trusted with a large amount of money. I froze. She said you were violent, she added. That you'd threatened her. I believed her. She was so convincing. That was the part that stung the most, not the lie. But how believable it must have been. I didn't cry, but my voice shook as I said, Thank you. She nodded. If you need me to testify, I will. I won't, I said, but I'll need a signed statement. Back in Seattle, I stared at the growing file Julian was assembling, and for the first time I realized they didn't just try to erase me, they tried to rewrite me into a villain. But the truth doesn't die. It waits. I didn't knock. I didn't call ahead. I simply walked through the front doors of my old high school as if I had a reason to be there. Because in a way, I did. The halls hadn't changed. The same blue lockers. The same outdated posters about anti-bullying and college readiness. The same smell of over-polished tile and reheated cafeteria food. Nostalgia didn't hit. It hissed. Like stepping back into a version of yourself you barely survived. My footsteps echoed. Nobody recognized me. Nobody was supposed to. I had traded the worn jeans and quiet eyes for tailored black pants, a clean-cut blazer, and a presence I had never been allowed to have back then. That alone made me dangerous. I found the administrative office and walked in like I owned the building. I'm here on behalf of the Linwood Foundation, I said to the secretary, voice calm, steady. We're evaluating schools for a regional educational grant. She looked up, startled. Oh, yes, we got your email. You're Ms. Eva Linwood, I smiled. We're allocating funds to programs focused on underserved students, scholarship access, mental health resources, things that tend to slip through the cracks. The woman nodded vigorously. We're so honored. The principal's just wrapping up a meeting. Would you like to wait in the counselor's lounge? Please. They led me down a hall I hadn't walked in years. The door creaked open, and a familiar voice made me freeze. And I've been saying for years, this school needs to do more for the invisible kids, the ones who aren't loud, who don't get in trouble, just quiet, falling through the cracks. Mrs. Perkins. She hadn't changed much, maybe a few more lines around her eyes, her hair pulled back tighter. But the tone, that unwavering calm wrapped in steel, was the same. She turned, looked at me. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out for a moment. Then, with the kind of softness I had only ever gotten from her, she said, I know you. We sat alone. I broke the silence first. I'm not here as Ariadne, not officially. She nodded slowly. I figured. I just wanted to see it, one last time, the place where I started believing I was nothing. Mrs. Perkins looked down at her hands. You weren't nothing, you were drowning, and nobody threw a rope. I didn't expect them to, I whispered. But you did. You gave me that internship list. You slipped me the name of that community college when Mom told the school not to waste time on me. She blinked back tears. I'm so sorry. You don't have to be, I said. But if we get this grant approved, I want you to oversee how it's used. Her eyes widened. You're serious? I'm richer than they ever dreamed, and I'd like some of that money to go to kids like me, the ones their parents don't clap for. Later that evening, back in my hotel suite, I opened the secured folder on my laptop. Julian had sent over the final pieces, copies of the forged documents, a timeline of the misused trust, and, most chilling, a transcription of a voicemail my mother left for a financial advisor last year. She doesn't need college money. She needs a wake-up call. We're investing it in Mason. He's the one who's going to make something of himself. My hands curled into fists. Not out of rage, out of resolve. The next morning, I signed a contract to fund the Linwood Initiative, a $2.5 million anonymous donation spread across 6 schools, including my old one. None of the schools knew who the donor was. All they saw was opportunity. But I wasn't done. There was one more place I needed to show up. Quietly. 2 weeks later, I walked into a job fair at a local community center in the neighboring town, where Mason was now attending junior college. I blended in as a recruiter for a tech startup, another LLC I owned under yet another name. He was there, at a booth, smiling too wide, pitching an app he hadn't built. I watched him for 15 minutes. He hadn't changed. Same smugness, same shallow charm. I approached. He didn't recognize me. You created this yourself? I asked. He nodded proudly. Designed it, coded it, marketed it. Interesting, I said, taking a business card. We've been tracking similar apps. We're good at recognizing stolen code. His face twitched. I leaned in slightly. Your sister might not have been good at being quiet, but she was good at seeing through BS. I walked away before he could ask who I was. Back in Seattle, Julian greeted me with news. They're applying for another scholarship, this time pretending you never existed. Their new FAFSA lists them as a family of 3. I smiled without humor. Let's show them what receipts look like. We sent an anonymous tip to the Department of Education. Not vindictive, just accurate, with attached documentation, forged signatures, misuse of funds. 3 weeks later, they were flagged for audit. I didn't need to watch what happened next. I didn't need to know the conversations, the panic, the scrambling. It was enough to know they'd feel something I lived with for years. invisible hands unraveling everything they thought they controlled. Seattle rain doesn't fall, it slides, the kind that taps the windows like it's asking permission to come in. I sat at my desk, a tumbler of untouched coffee going cold beside me, watching the storm roll down the glass. The world outside blurred. Perfect metaphor, really. Clarity had a price, and I was paying it in quiet. Julian's latest update sat in my inbox. I'd read it twice already. My parents were under federal investigation for financial aid fraud. The IRS had opened a parallel audit, and my old high school was launching an internal review of scholarship misappropriations tied to their sudden generosity on Mason's behalf. None of it had my name on it. That was the point. But for the first time since I walked away from that house with a single suitcase and no plan, I didn't feel powerful. I felt empty. I called Julian. "Is this still the right thing?" I asked. He paused. "Is it still the truth?" "Yes." "Then it's the right thing." I spent the next few days in motion. Not running, executing. Quiet meetings with people who understood discretion. Bankers, real estate agents, educators, lawyers. Not one of them knew my full name. Only what they needed. It wasn't revenge. Not really. It was a redistribution of narrative. They'd taken my name, my story, my right to grow. I was simply taking back the pen. The day everything cracked was a Thursday. I was in a midtown office tower, finalizing the purchase of a publishing startup when my burner rang. Unknown number. Normally, I wouldn't answer, but something in me said I had to. "Ariadne?" My entire body froze. It was Mason. How he got this number, I didn't know. But his voice, slightly deeper than I remembered, still carrying that smugness like cologne, was unmistakable. "Hello?" he asked again, more uncertain this time. I let silence hang a beat too long. Then coolly, "How did you get this number?" He sighed. "Mom's losing it. I found your name on some legal paperwork from the audit." "So they were digging now." He continued. "They think someone set them up. They think it's you." "That's not possible," I replied. "I don't exist." A beat of silence. Then quieter. "You always made me look worse than I was." I laughed, cold and short. "You did that all by yourself." I hung up. Then I turned off the phone and dropped it in the trash. That night, I walked through downtown, blending into the crowds like I used to blend into family photos. Always present, never seen. There's a freedom in becoming your own ghost. Back at the apartment, I poured myself a glass of wine. I hadn't slept in 2 days. Couldn't. I'd been living off adrenaline and momentum, but I couldn't shake the call. Not because of what he said, but because he sounded scared. 3 days later, the twist came. Not from them, but from the press. An article surfaced in a regional investigative blog. Family ties and falsified files, the audit rocking suburbia. No names were redacted, no aliases. Full disclosure, my mother's mugshot, my father's bail record, my name nowhere. They'd tried to disown me, delete me, and now they were the ones exposed while I remained untouchable. It should have felt like closure. Instead, it felt like static in my chest. The next day, I received a letter. Handwritten. No return address. Neat cursive I recognized instantly. Dad. Inside, 4 sentences. "You won! I hope it was worth it. We did what we had to. Mason's still a kid. Don't punish him for our choices." There was no apology, just blame wrapped in self-pity. I didn't respond, but I kept the letter. A week later, I showed up, uninvited, to an alumni fundraiser. It was hosted at the country club my parents had once desperately wanted to join. I entered under my business identity, Eva Linwood, anonymous benefactor. The event was predictably shallow, smiles that didn't reach eyes, compliments as currency. But near the end, the MC took the mic. "We'd like to honor our silent donor tonight, who made this scholarship endowment possible. Please welcome Ms. Linwood." As I walked up, the crowd clapped politely, then froze. Because my mother was there, and she recognized me. her face drained. She clutched Mason's arm. He turned, saw me, and stilled. I smiled. Not wide, not cruel, just enough. I leaned into the mic and said, "It's been a long journey getting here. I'm just grateful that sometimes silence speaks louder than anything else." Applause. Not thunderous, but real. I walked off stage, past them both without stopping. No one tried to speak, and I didn't look back. The first time I laughed, really laughed, after everything, I was sitting in the back of a cafe in Prague, listening to a street violinist butcher Vivaldi. It was off-key, way too fast, and passionate in all the wrong places. But something about the chaos of it broke the dam inside me. I laughed so hard I cried, and no one around me knew why. That was the moment I realized I had survived. The next 6 months were about reinvention, not revenge, not reputation. Just me. I moved to Europe temporarily, living light, under my own name this time. No aliases, no burner phones. I enrolled in a condensed executive program in Zurich, built relationships with global educators, and quietly began investing in underfunded women-led startups. One founder in Morocco called me her shadow angel. I liked that. I didn't want to be known. I wanted to be effective. Still, at night, the past visited like smoke under a locked door. Sometimes I heard my mother's voice in my dreams, not screaming, but calm, disapproving, smug. Other times it was silence that haunted me. The quiet that came when I'd walk into the house and no one would look up. Healing, I learned, wasn't linear. Back in the States, I met Julian for lunch. He slid a folder across the table. "The audit is complete. They lost the house." I didn't flinch. "And Mason?" I asked. Julian hesitated. "Dropped out. Working at a local IT shop. Low-level stuff. No charges filed against him. Just left behind." There was no satisfaction in that. Only a kind of quiet closing. "I want to send him something," I said after a moment. Julian raised an eyebrow. "A letter," I clarified. "Not money." It took me a week to write. Simple, no bitterness. "You were a child. You were taught to treat me the way they did. That's not on you. But you're not a child now. You get to decide who you are from here." I never signed it. Just folded it neatly and mailed it. No return address. A month later, I launched the Ari Project, a startup incubator for first-gen entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. I never put my name on the site, but in every interview, I let my story shape the questions I asked, not the answers I gave. Someone once asked, "Where did you learn to lead so fearlessly?" I smiled. From being told I couldn't. And then came the call. Not from Mason, not from my parents, from my mother's sister, an aunt I barely knew, who had long cut contact with our side of the family. "I heard what you did," she said. "The family's falling apart." I said nothing. "They're saying you destroyed them." I exhaled slowly. I didn't destroy them. I just stopped covering for what they were. The conversation was short, but it reminded me, no matter how far you run, people will always try to rewrite your ending, so I wrote mine first. It started with an email. Subject: "Can we talk?" Sender: Walker. I stared at it for a full minute before opening it. "Ariadne, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I'm not asking for anything, just a chance to talk, face to face, no pressure. Mason." I didn't respond, but I didn't delete it either. Something in his tone was different, not demanding, not entitled, just quiet, like someone who'd finally been left in a silent room with nothing but his own thoughts. 3 days later, he showed up. I was at a coffee shop in Oakland, catching up with a founder I'd mentored. I stepped outside for air, and there he was, hands in his jacket pockets, eyes unsure. He looked older, more tired, less polished. "You've been following me?" I asked calmly. "No," he said quickly. "I asked Julian. He didn't give me your address. Just said you were here for a meeting. I waited outside." I crossed my arms. You waited? He nodded. 4 hours? I said nothing. Finally, he blurted, I just wanted to say I'm sorry. We sat on a bench, distant but facing each other. I was horrible to you, he said. I thought, if I joined in, they'd love me more. Or at least not hate me. They didn't love anyone, I said. They just needed people to mirror their own excuses. Mason looked down. I didn't know about the money, the trust, any of it. Would it have changed anything if you did? I don't know, he admitted. Probably not then. But now? Yeah. He fidgeted with the zipper of his hoodie. I lost everything. School, friends, respect. All of it tied to that image they built for me. When it crumbled, I had no idea who I was. I studied him. This wasn't pity. This wasn't reconciliation. It was assessment. Why now? I asked. Because I see what you did with nothing. And I had everything, and did nothing. He reached into his bag and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. I fixed Nana's music box, he said quietly. Found it in the attic before they sold the house. I unwrapped it. My hands trembled before I could stop them. You remembered, I whispered. He nodded. It still plays. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't beg. That's how I knew it was real. Later that night, I received a call from a restricted number. This time, I answered. Ariadne. Her voice was thinner than I remembered, strained. Mom, I said with no warmth. I know you hate me, she began. No, I don't. She went quiet. I'm not well, she said, choosing the words like they hurt. The doctors think it's stress-induced. I lost everything. We both did. I didn't take it from you. I know that now. Silence again. Are you calling for money? I asked. No, she said quickly. No. Just, I needed to say it. I was cruel. Not just to you, to myself, to everyone. Her voice broke. I'm sorry. I don't expect anything. I just didn't want to die without saying it. I didn't hang up, but I didn't reply. And after a moment, she whispered, Thank you for not making me beg. Then the line went dead. I didn't cry, but I sat in the dark for a long time. The last time I returned to my hometown, no one noticed. No reporters, no family, no whispers. Just me, walking through a farmer's market on a Sunday morning, coffee in hand, sunglasses shielding my face not from recognition, but from memory. I passed the park where I once read books just to be invisible, the library where I filed college applications no one ever sent. And finally, I stopped in front of the community center. There was a plaque on the wall now, Linwood Learning Hub, sponsored anonymously. Inside, the rooms were full of life, kids coding on borrowed laptops, parents attending evening classes, counselors with real training, real resources. No one knew I built it. That was the point. Later that week, I was invited to speak on a podcast. The host introduced me as a self-made investor and startup advisor. Midway through, she asked, What do you tell people who feel left behind by the people they trusted most? I paused, then said, You don't have to forgive to let go. You just have to decide they don't get to shape what comes next. The host smiled. That's powerful, I smiled back. It's not power, it's peace. That night, I sat on the balcony of my apartment in San Francisco, looking out over the lights. Next to me, Nana's music box played a tune I'd heard since childhood. Soft, a little warped, but still beautiful. I wasn't waiting for anything anymore. Not their regret, not their praise, not even closure. Just the quiet that finally felt like mine. Looking back, I didn't win because I got lucky. I won because I stopped letting other people write my story. If you've ever been told you weren't enough or felt discarded by those who were supposed to protect you, know this: you are not their opinion of you. Healing doesn't always come with forgiveness, and sometimes closure is just peace you give yourself. What would you do if you had the chance to start over on your own terms? If this story moved you or made you reflect on your own journey, drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. And if it didn't hit the mark, I'd love to hear why. Your voice matters here. If you found something real in this video, please hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next story. We're building something raw and real here. Let's keep going, together.